Okay, thank you all for joining us today. We're going to get started and some people will still continue to trickle in here over the next few minutes. My name is Betsy Weber and I'm the Assistant Director here at the Environmental Defense Center. Today we're going to hear from our Environmental Analyst, Brian Trautwein, as well as our Staff Attorney, Tara Messing, about an oil proposal up in North County, Santa Barbara. First off, I just want to get started with a couple housekeeping items. Today, the webinar will be recorded, so that will be available on our website and also social media afterwards for reference or to share with anyone else. We also are going to do our best to keep this to 45 minutes. So we hope to end at 12:45, and that will include a little question and answer section at the end. Throughout the presentation today, if you would like to submit a question that comes to mind, at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a little Q&A icon there that you can click on. Simply type in your question and hit submit, and I will do my best to get to as many of those as we can at the end. So I'm going to turn it over now to our Environmental Analyst, Brian Trautwein.
Thank you. Welcome everybody to our webinar today on the two onshore oil projects in Cat Canyon, currently undergoing review by Santa Barbara County. Today we'll also be giving you some background about two related processes that will affect the Cat Canyon projects, and these include the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Draft General Conservation Plan for oil and gas activities in Santa Barbara County, and the proposed aquifer exemption currently under review by the California Geologic Energy Management Division, or CalGEM, and the State Water Board. My name is Brian Trautwein, and I'm the Environmental Analyst and Watershed Program Coordinator at the Environmental Defense Center. EDC is a nonprofit public interest environmental law firm working to protect and enhance our environment through education, advocacy, and legal action. I, along with my colleague, EDC Staff Attorney Tara Messing, will be talking with you today about these two projects on which we've worked since 2017. And EDC and our clients and colleagues are celebrating a victory. 2 weeks ago, the proponents of the third oil and gas project in Cat Canyon withdrew their application. So now we are focusing our resources on defeating the other two projects, the Aera and TerraCore projects. EDC represents itself and our other clients, the Sierra Club Los Padres chapter and Santa Barbara County Action Network. And we're consulting with a wildlife biologist, an aquatic toxicologist, and a hydrogeophysicist. This slide shows an overview of our presentation today. Leading off, I will explain the enhanced oil recovery methods to be used by these projects if they are approved, and I will give an overview of the two projects. I will also provide information about the proposed Cat Canyon aquifer exemption and the draft oil and gas conservation plan for Santa Barbara County. Tara will then discuss AERA'S project in more detail and its environmental and human health impacts and how you can get involved and take action. Cat Canyon is located several miles southeast of Santa Maria. And as you'll see from our slides, Cat Canyon is a beautiful mosaic of oak woodlands and savannas, coastal sage and chaparral, grasslands and ranches. Enhanced oil recovery is the process of increasing the amount of oil that can be recovered from an underground oil reservoir, usually by injecting a substance, a liquid or gas, into an existing oil well to increase the pressure and reduce the viscosity of the oil. Both projects propose to use enhanced oil recovery techniques, including cyclic steam injection, steam flooding, and acidization. Enhanced oil recovery is being used in Cat Canyon because after most of the easier to reach, higher quality crude oil was extracted from the oil field, the big oil companies left the area. But these new technologies are allowing operators to inject high pressure steam deep into the earth to get the thick tar-like oil that couldn't be pumped before. And with regard to the photos in this presentation, note that all of them were taken from public roads around the Cat Canyon oil field, unless otherwise specified. Cyclic steam injection is one type of enhanced oil recovery method used to extract heavy oil and tar sands. Large polluting boilers create steam, and then that steam is injected into wells deep in the earth through the cyclic steaming process for several days. And then the steam is allowed to soak in the wells, usually for several more days before the wells are pumped. While the first set of wells are soaking, steam injectors move to the next set of wells. After soaking, the heated oil and water are pumped to the surface. And this cycle is repeated periodically. Steam flooding involves the constant injection of steam using steam injection wells. The steam heats up the surrounding rock formation, as you can see in this graphic, and then the heated oil is extracted through production wells. With steam flooding, it requires separate steam injector and production wells. Also, more water and more natural gas are needed for this method as compared to cyclic steaming. There is a lot of concern about fracking, and rightly so, but less is known about its sister technology, acidizing. Acidizing involves the injection of several toxic chemicals and acids into the well for the purpose of increasing production or for well maintenance. There are three different techniques for acidizing: acid maintenance, matrix acidization, and acid fracturing. Acidizing uses significantly higher concentrations of dangerous chemicals than fracking. Where chemicals may make up less than 5% of the fracking fluids, acidizing chemicals can make up between 6 and 17% of the fluid. Both projects will use acid for well maintenance. Acid maintenance is a procedure regularly used to remove mineral deposits or scale from inside the wells. In acid maintenance, operators inject acid solutions at specific locations in the wellbore to clean the scale from the inner surfaces of the well and equipment, without any acid actually penetrating into the surrounding rock formation. Acid fracturing and matrix acidization, on the other hand, inject acid into the underground rock formation to increase oil production. Although both Aera and TerraCore claim they will not use acid for production, the project's EIRs admit that acid will be injected into the rock formation, which is best characterized as using acid to enhance production, not merely for well maintenance. And many of the acidizing chemicals are classified and regulated as hazardous air pollutants. These include methanol, hydrofluoric acid, formaldehyde, and toluene. The projects would also use horizontal drilling in addition to conventional vertical wells to increase production. Horizontal drilling allows for multiple wells on each well pad. As depicted in the graphic, horizontal drilling is a well drilled in a manner to reach an angle of near 90 degrees. As recognized in AERA'S draft environmental impact report, there are additional impacts from horizontal drilling, including increased air pollution and increased greenhouse gas emissions. The draft environmental impact report also states that the increased drilling angle is more complicated and more costly to drill and operate, and therefore more well replacements may be required, further increasing the environmental impacts. In addition to drilling all of these wells, the projects will need to dispose of substantial volumes of toxic wastewater. Next, I will explain how these projects propose to get rid of their toxic wastewater, including the pending aquifer exemption for the Cat Canyon oil field. Drilling for oil in California produces much more water than it does oil. For instance, in 2014, 205 million barrels of oil was produced in California, but more than 3.3 billion barrels of water was extracted. Water produced during oil and gas production is toxic, but it may be disposed of into underground aquifers or reused as steam. Water that is re-injected underground for disposal is regulated under the EPA's Class 2 Underground Injection Control Program. Much more water is used and much more wastewater is generated from enhanced oil recovery methods, such as steam injection. And then operators are allowed to inject their dirty and toxic wastewater into our underground aquifers for disposal under what is known as a, quote, aquifer exemption. Under EPA's regulations, aquifers with high salinity and not currently being used as drinking water supplies may be exempt from the Safe Drinking Water Act, allowing energy companies to dispose of toxic wastewater into these aquifers. But EDC believes that these aquifers are needed in the future as drinking water supplies or for irrigation. An aquifer exemption is currently in place in the Cat Canyon oil field, but the two project applicants, along with BE Conway Energy, have applied to expand the area where they can dump their toxic wastewater. The environmental impact report for TerraCore's project estimates that at peak production, 50,000 barrels of toxic wastewater per day will be injected underground into our aquifers. And AERA'S project will inject over 15 million gallons of brine and toxic wastewater into underground aquifers each year. Another threat to our natural resources is the Oil and Gas General Conservation Plan for Santa Barbara County, drafted by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. The projects will be constructed in the habitats of some of Santa Barbara's rarest wildlife species, so operators must obtain a permit from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for any harm to species that occurs incidentally to their operations. And what that means is that if an Endangered Species Act is required if any red-legged frogs or California tiger salamanders are hurt or killed as a result of the oil and gas projects. Before a permit can be issued, a conservation plan must be drafted under the Endangered Species Act. And this is usually done on a project-by-project basis. But in this case, the Fish and Wildlife Service drafted a general plan that covers all oil and gas activities from exploration to decommissioning. So any operator can use this plan to get their permit without a project-specific habitat conservation plan. The General Conservation Plan would cover all oil and gas projects in non-federal portions of Santa Barbara County for 20 years, essentially greasing the skids for future oil and gas development in our county. The General Conservation Plan would allow oil companies to permanently destroy 675 acres of California tiger salamander habitat, including 152 acres of designated critical habitat. 355 acres of critical habitat for the red-legged frog will also be destroyed under the General Conservation Plan, and up to 27 acres of Lompoc yerba santa stands. Lompoc yerba santa is an endangered plant in the area. The General Conservation Plan has no cap on destruction of upland habitat for red-legged frogs outside of the critical habitat areas. And with 1 million plant and animal species threatened with extinction, according to the UN's 2019 Global Assessment Report, including 40% of amphibians around the world being endangered, allowing so much habitat loss is the last thing we should be considering. The state of California uses a tool called CalEnviroScore. And it uses this tool to document areas of disproportionately high environmental burdens or pollution on a precinct by precinct basis throughout California. The precinct, including Cat Canyon, which overlies the Santa Maria groundwater basin, already faces tremendous threats to its water resources based on known contamination and cleanup sites. Cat Canyon is among 1% of California precincts with the highest threats to groundwater. Over 100,000 people depend on the Santa Maria groundwater basin, and local towns nearby depend entirely on groundwater. Threats to surface waters like the Santa Maria and Sisquoc rivers are already in the 97th percentile. But these projects would result in an estimated 4 oil and/or toxic wastewater spills every year, posing what the environmental impact reports call a, quote, significant and unavoidable impact to water resources. And drinking water is the most precious of all. And this area's drinking water supplies already rank in the highest 10% in terms of pollution threats in California. Greca's well casing breach up in the Cat Canyon area only highlights concerns that these projects threaten our limited drinking water supplies in our arid region. There is extensive soil contamination in Cat Canyon from prior oil operations. On this map, the blue outline is Aera's project site. The gray areas are where Aera proposes to develop. The orange areas are where soil contamination was mapped over a decade ago. Note the linear nature of the orange polygons. This is due to the fact that much of the soil contamination is in the bottom of canyons, in the creeks and drainages, which is the last place you want soil contamination because it can wash down the creeks into the town of Sisquoc and the Sisquoc River. If these projects are approved, that would delay cleanup of this soil contamination for the 30 to 50-year project lives. Instead of worsening the problem by increasing oil and gas drilling, we're advocating that the county deny these dangerous projects and require cleanup. Both projects are thermally enhanced oil recovery projects. TerraCore is a newly formed organization. It has no track record, but it recently purchased the ERG project site. Aera is a Kern County-based oil company. Their projects combined could result in around 480 to over 500 new wells, which could triple onshore production in Santa Barbara County. TerraCore's project includes up to 187 to 233 new thermally enhanced oil wells, up to 102 well and equipment pads, 4 steam generators, and a 3.5-mile natural gas pipeline. TerraCore's project will use existing disposal wells to inject around 50,000 barrels of contaminated wastewater every day. Aera's project involves 296 oil injection and water wells, up to 72 well pads, 6 steam generators, and a 14-mile, 8-inch diameter natural gas pipeline to feed the steam generators. The Aera Environmental Impact Report analyzes a 189 well alternative. And although that sounds like fewer wells, it actually doesn't reduce production at all. Aera's project includes a central processing facility, a steam generation site, roads, an entrance over Cat Canyon Creek, pipelines, buildings, parking lots, and stormwater detention basins. For both projects, light crude oil would be trucked in from the Central Valley over 100 miles away to mix with the thick tar-like oil extracted in Cat Canyon. And then the blended crude would be trucked back out again on our local roads. Substantial quantities of fresh water are required for dust control, fire protection, irrigation, office use, and well drilling. Aera estimates that its project will use over 6 million gallons of fresh water annually. TerraCore's project will also require over 6 million gallons of fresh water per year, for a total of over 13 million gallons of fresh water per year. EDC's research indicates that actual freshwater use will probably be substantially higher. One of the biggest threats with these projects and one of the biggest health concerns is that a well casing failure could allow injected toxic wastewater to enter our aquifers that are used for drinking water or irrigation. And in fact, a local vintner near Cat Canyon has already announced that his new $500,000 irrigation well is contaminated. This is a photo of an oil tanker truck near Cat Canyon. Trucks spill more oil than both rail and pipelines and have 6 times the fatality rate. The 2 projects could add several hundred oil tankers per day to our local roads. These include Dominion and Fox and Canyon Road and some other roads that Tara will mention in a few moments. During construction of Aera's gas pipeline, trucks will travel right through the town of Orcutt, and temporary road closures will be needed. Construction traffic would be generated by these 2 projects for several years. Truck trips would include materials and equipment deliveries, oil tankers, and water trucks for dust control, all mixing with public traffic on our local roads, creating a very unsafe situation. Oil tanker traffic on local roads will significantly increase if these projects are approved. Both would have oil tanker trucks bringing in the light crude oil from the Central Valley to blend with the local heavy tar, and then the trucks would take that and blended crude right back out on local roadways. And many of the trucks would travel on Highway 166, where just 2 weeks ago, an oil tanker crashed and spilled 4,500 gallons of crude oil into the flowing Cuyama River. The county's environmental impact reports have more information about the truck routes, so you can certainly take a look at that and see how these projects threaten you, your family, and your friends. Significant and unavoidable noise will result from the use of heavy equipment for site preparation and grading, well drilling, installation of equipment, paving, and construction. During the years of operations, noise will be generated by well pad equipment operation, including well pump jacks, workover drilling, site maintenance, and trucking. The county's environmental impact report for the TerraCore project notes that it results in a, quote, significant and unavoidable Class 1 impact, noise impact to neighbors. TerraCore's project proposes to grade and to pave over 91 acres just for roads, and much more for well pads, equipment areas, production facilities, and pipelines. AERA'S project, however, is the most significant in terms of grading and in terms of habitat destruction. 6 million cubic yards of soil would be graded for AERA'S project. How much soil is that? Picture a football field covered in soil to a height of 3,600 feet, as tall as the San Ynez Mountains behind Santa Barbara. That's how much soil Aera proposes to grade. And Aera's project footprint would be 305 acres up in this sensitive area, and it would remove hundreds of mature oak trees. I will now turn the presentation over to EDC Staff Attorney, Tara Messing.
Thank you, Brian. During the second part of our presentation, we will dive into the Aera East Cat Canyon Oilfield Redevelopment Project, as depicted in the map here. Aera is jointly owned by Shell and ExxonMobil, with its headquarters in Bakersfield in Kern County. Aera is proposing to drill hundreds of new wells in the Cat Canyon oil field, using highly polluting and risky steam injection methods to extract the oil, as well as acidizing. We expect that the final environmental impact report for this project will be released in June of this year. After the release of the final report, there will be hearings on the project before the Planning Commission, and we will need your voice to tell decision makers that we do not support this project. We hope this presentation will provide a better understanding of the significant environmental impacts from Aera's proposal. Since defeating PCEC cyclic steam injection proposal in the neighboring Orcutt oil field in 2016, we have learned that these steam injection projects have a much larger impact on our community and the environment than what is disclosed during the environmental review process. Aera's project is no exception. Upon review of the draft environmental impact report, we discovered that so many of the project's impacts to our air, water, climate, and communities were missing, unknown, or unmitigated, frustrating the very purpose of environmental review. Let's take a look in more detail. One of the most significant impacts of this fossil fuel project is its effect on climate change. The California Environmental Quality Act is clear in its mandate that the county, as the lead agency for environmental review, must analyze and disclose the impacts caused by the project's greenhouse gas emissions. According to the draft EIR, the project would generate more than 300,000 metric tons of CO2 per year, which is equivalent to about 65,000 cars on the road. The county's threshold of significance for greenhouse gas emissions is 1,000 metric tons per year. To mitigate these emissions, the draft environmental impact report relies on speculative and unsubstantiated mitigation measures that are not capable of minimizing the project's significant adverse impacts. AERA'S project would also result in impacts from indirect emissions, like end-use impacts, and contribute to cumulatively significant climate change effects. These effects are not only global in nature, but also affect our region. California is especially vulnerable to climate change due to its diverse climate and dynamic geography. California's annual average temperatures have shown warming consistent with global trends, and research is showing that Santa Barbara's once mild climate is warming at double the rate of other parts in the United States. This project employs a highly energy-intensive method of oil extraction that will result in significant increases in air emissions and contribute to global climate change. The continuous injection of steam deep underground in order to extract the heavy crude oil requires the constant use of dirty steam generators, which emit high levels of greenhouse gases and other air pollutants hazardous to human health. The oil that AERA wants to extract is the bottom of the barrel, heavy, viscous crude like tar sands oil. It is so heavy, in fact, that Cat Canyon oil is estimated to be among the top 10% of carbon-intense operations in the world when factoring in thermal production methods and life cycle. The draft EIR incorrectly asserts that the carbon intensity of the Cat Canyon oil field is less than the carbon intensity of the average barrel of oil supplied to California's refineries. This assumption is based on conventional production. However, AERA'S project is for thermally enhanced oil recovery, which uses polluting steam injection to extract the heavy crude oil. The carbon intensity of steam injection is substantially higher than the carbon intensity with conventional drilling, because steaming requires large amounts of energy to stimulate the oil. There are many threats to our surface and groundwater resources from AERA'S steam injection project. These include spills of produced water and oil, injecting dangerous acids underground for acidizing, and disposing of toxic wastewater into underground aquifers. Contamination of surface and groundwater resources from the project's spills or leaks is identified as a Class 1 impact in the draft EIR. This means that even with mitigation, impacts on surface and groundwater quality from spills of oil, produced wastewater, and other hazardous materials remain significant and unavoidable. Spills and leaks can flow from the project's new oil wells, trucks, pipelines, and oil production facilities, threatening to degrade surface and groundwater quality. Surface spills of oil and produced water can breach containment and reach waterways or percolate down to underground drinking water sources. We cannot afford to take such risks with our drinking water. Furthermore, although the injection of the steam to loosen the heavy crude oil occurs deeper than the freshwater zone, the steaming process could cause the upward or horizontal migration of contaminants like oil, acids, or other chemicals in the produced water. Once an aquifer is contaminated, it is extremely hard, if not impossible, to remediate. The state recognizes that the threat to our water resources from onshore oil development is significant. In fact, in 2015, the California Water Board and the U.S. Geological Survey initiated a regional groundwater monitoring program in oil and gas fields to determine where and to what degree groundwater quality might be affected by oil and gas activities. The Cat Canyon oil field was identified as a high priority for potential groundwater contamination. This study is currently underway in the field. We should not even be considering AERA'S project until the results of this study are published and assessed. AERA is also proposing to inject dangerous acids into its wells during operations. Based on statements in the draft EIR, we are asking for clarification in the final EIR about whether Aera is using acids for well maintenance as well as for well stimulation, meaning production. As Brian mentioned, acidizing for well stimulation uses a significantly higher concentration of chemicals than hydraulic fracturing fluid. And although acid maintenance uses a lower concentration of acid, the frequency of acid maintenance injections is such a common and routine procedure used in wells that the total accumulated load of acids in a region could become significant. Oilfield wastewater and produced water from Aera's project will be disposed of underground into the Sisquoc Formation via an estimated 14 injection wells. Over the 30+ year project life, the project will inject billions of gallons of toxic wastewater into underground aquifers, increasing the potential for fluid migration and contamination of underground sources of drinking water. As of 2018, Santa Barbara County had the second highest number of disposal wells in the state, second only to Kern County, which has more than 45 times the number of enhanced and oil recovery wells than Santa Barbara County. We also discovered from CalGEM documents that for years, operators in Cat Canyon have been illegally discharging their wastewater into underground aquifers that may be suitable for drinking water or other beneficial uses. These injections directly violate the federal drinking water protections under the Safe Drinking Water Act. Years of illegal injections of chemicals and toxic wastewater have likely altered baseline water quality, which unfortunately could affect the analysis of the project's impacts on groundwater quality. Finally, the injection of steam, directional drilling, oil extraction, and wastewater disposal into underground formations can increase the risk of spills, earthquakes, and subsidence, and potentially cause well casing failures that could contaminate drinking water aquifers. During the Planning Commission hearing on March 27, 2019, Mr. James Thurber, part of the Aspen consultant team for the TerraCore project, testified that he did not know whether increasing the amount of wastewater injected underground for TerraCore's project alone would cause more earthquakes. He stated, quote, "It's just hard to know." There's a lot of misleading information about how much fresh water this oil project will consume. You may have heard that this project will not use fresh water for steaming, but substantial quantities of fresh water are needed to drill each well and for many other activities during construction and throughout the years of operations. Aera's draft EIR severely underestimates the project's total freshwater use. The analysis omitted a number of the project's freshwater needs, including freshwater for acidizing, well maintenance activities, well workovers and re-drills, safety, and equipment cleaning, among others. Freshwater for Aera's project would be drawn from the Santa Maria groundwater basin. The freshwater in this basin is entirely relied upon by the communities of Sisquoc and Los Alamos for drinking water. According to a 2014 study status report, groundwater levels in the basin have been gradually declining since 2002 and have declined more rapidly since 2012. Aera's project, along with TerraCore steam injection project, will need to draw millions of gallons of freshwater from this declining water supply in direct competition with freshwater needs of residents, agricultural operations, and local businesses. The project will also add hundreds of oil tanker truck trips and other heavy-duty trucks each day to local roadways, including but not limited to Dominion Road, East Clark Avenue, East Betarabia Road, and Cat Canyon Road. The project proposes to truck light crude oil from Aera's Bell Ridge producing complex in Kern County along US Highway 101 and State Routes 46 and 33, and then truck the produced blended crude out for refining for a daily total of 190 one-way tanker truck trips. These oil tanker trucks pose a serious safety risk to the public, increase the risk of accidents to other drivers, pedestrians, and cyclists, and significantly degrade local roadways. In California, 27 oil tanker truck crashes have occurred from October 2011 to December 2018, collectively spilling at least 75,000 gallons of potentially toxic liquids and products onto roadways and adjacent lands. Accidents involving oil tanker trucks on California roadways have been caused by the tanker truck driver losing control of the vehicle, tire blowouts, passenger vehicles losing control, speeding, and drunk drivers. Resulting environmental damage from accidents include fires, leaking of contamination into storm drains, and drinking water contamination. Just recently, on March 21st, an oil tanker truck carrying 6,000 gallons of crude oil overturned and crashed into the Cuyama River east of Santa Maria. The crude oil flowed from the tanker downstream towards the Twitchell Reservoir. Aera is just one of 3 projects, the other 2 including TerraCore and the Exxon trucking proposal, that could collectively add hundreds of tanker trucks to local roads daily. In addition to the risk of spills and accidents, tanker trucks are heavy and destroy roadways. Damage caused by one heavy truck is equal to 18,000 passenger vehicles traveling on the same road. The cost to fix this damage falls to the taxpayers. Let's not pave the way for these trucks to be added to our local roadways. The trucking impacts are another reason to speak up against this project. And finally, the project site hosts 99 special status species, which includes rare, threatened, endangered, or otherwise protected species. This is a significant number of protected species to be found at a project site. The project will significantly impact the endangered California tiger salamander, as well as wetlands, oak woodlands, grasslands, and coastal sage habitats, which support threatened and endangered species. Threats to the impaired San Antonio Creek place the endangered, unarmored 3-spined stickleback at risk, which is a fish that occurs in only a handful of streams around the world. Spills of toxic chemicals, acids, or oil into surface waters also threaten to destroy sensitive California tiger salamander and California red-legged frog breeding habitat. Finally, according to the draft EIR, a significant amount of the project's impacts to biological resources would occur from installing well pads, roads, and other proposed project infrastructure. To construct these project features, Aera must grade over and/or pave valuable habitats relied on by species for nesting, foraging, breeding, or resting. Grading and paving activities on the project site will result in the permanent loss of over 200 acres of habitat for special status species, as well as cause the take of these species. However, the full extent of the biological impacts from these activities is not analyzed in the draft EIR because the total volume of grading and acreage for road paving has not been quantified or disclosed. For this reason, there are likely additional impacts to biological resources that are omitted from the draft EIR. As I mentioned, we expect the final environmental impact report for Aera's project to be released in June of this year. After the release of the final report, there will be hearings on the project before the Planning Commission. At that time, we want you to write letters to the Planning Commission and testify at the hearings before decision makers to let them know that our community does not support this project. For now, we ask that you sign up for EDC emails and alerts and stay connected with us on social media. We hope that this information has been helpful, and if you have any questions, Brian and I are here and ready to answer your questions.
Thank you so much, Brian and Tara. That was a lot of wonderful information there. We're just going to run through a couple questions that have come in now, and we'll do our best. We only have a few minutes here, but we will definitely get to what we can. And as Tara mentioned, feel free to send along any further questions that we don't get to their email addresses that are on the screen there. So first question, is the land to be used in the oil production owned by the oil companies, or is it leased from a government entity?
Sorry, can you repeat the question, Betsy?
Yes, of course. They're just wondering if the land that's going to be used for the production is owned by the companies or if it's leased from the government.
Sure. And just so Brian can also be a part of the question and answer, I think we just need to get his video up too. But so an interesting thing actually about these projects, and you can see it on the map that's on this question screen, is that the Aera and the TerraCore projects actually overlap. Their leases overlap. So that is something you can see the blue line over the Aera Cat Canyon project site too. But these leases are owned by the leases are owned by the oil companies. So essentially what we have here is with the overlap, we were wondering too kind of what the different project components, how those those operators are going to be working together in terms of the shared leases. But each site has different leases. And Aera, while it doesn't have really any existing operations in Cat Canyon, only a few test wells, they do have quite a few lease holdings in the oil field.
Great, thanks. Also, regarding the map that you're referencing there, there's a comment that these projects look like they're located fairly close to some communities, and they're wondering if there are any protections put in place for the residents that live so close to these project sites.
Yes, so these projects do pose a disproportionate risk to surrounding communities, especially due to proximity. So residences are located in the areas surrounding the oil field. The nearest residence to the TerraCore project is about 1,300 feet away. And there's even an elementary school within the community of Sisquoc that's located 0.7 miles to the closest project component for TerraCore. But fortunately, CalGEM, or the California Geologic Energy Management Division, has been undertaking a process to put new public health and safety protections in place for communities near oil and gas production operations. So this rulemaking will involve public input and also consider the best available science and data to inform new and strengthened protections. And the first step in this process has been a series of pre-rulemaking community meetings to seek public input. And due to COVID, unfortunately, these public meetings have been postponed, but EDC, on behalf of our clients, previously testified at the workshop in Santa Maria. We advocated for many different protections, including prohibiting new permits from drilling through groundwater basins that are used by communities for drinking water, setbacks from oil and gas activities, and regular testing of produced water for steam injection operations, among other things. So we're involved in this process along with many other groups and individuals advocating for stronger protections.
And I might just add, with respect to neighbors around the project site, coincidentally on today's Planning Commission agenda for Santa Barbara County, there's a new home proposed right next to the Cat Canyon oil field. So it is an area where people live and enjoy their quiet, open space, and all those things will be certainly damaged by these projects if they are approved.
Great, thank you guys. Another question here, you mentioned a study on groundwater contamination. Do you know when the results of the study should be released? And if the results do show contamination, what will be done with that data?
Yes, so the study is ongoing in the Cat Canyon oil field right now. The good news is that we are expecting the final data and reports from the studies that occurred in the Orchid, which is adjacent to the Cat Canyon field, as well as the Oxnard oil field down in Ventura County, hopefully this year. So we do have some information from preliminary findings released by USGS about those studies. And based on those, we feel pretty confident that it's very likely oil field fluids or thermogenic gases, meaning gases from oil and gas operations, will be detected in at least some of the wells in Cat Canyon. In the Orchid oil field, the preliminary results showed mixing between oil field fluids and groundwater in 4 of the 16 wells sampled. And in the Oxnard oil field, there was thermogenic methane gas detected in at least 2 wells and possibly a third. And most notably, the USGS found that the groundwater wells with the highest thermogenic signals were actually located right above that cyclic steaming activity. So we are waiting on these results, but we definitely feel that nothing should go forward, including the aquifer exemption proposal, until the results of these this groundwater monitoring study in Cat Canyon are released and assessed.
Great, thank you. I know we're pushing it on time here. I'll try to get just 2 more questions out here. And again, feel free to email Brian and Tara if we're not getting to yours after this. Isn't Cat Canyon oil field an existing field that's about 100 years old, in which case lots of destruction has already been done? It seems like this might be a good place to drill.
Well, it's certainly not a good place to drill, given that it's over the Santa Maria groundwater basin, I think, which is a threat to so many people's drinking water supplies. But it's also a very important environmental area. Cat Canyon is a very beautiful, rich area. It has creeks that flow through it. It has oak woodlands. It has savannas, grasslands, areas of coastal sage scrub habitat, and even chaparral. And it hosts over approximately 99 different special status species. These are rare and endangered animals and plants that occur in Cat Canyon. So clearly it holds a lot of important value ecologically. And the impacts to those can't be underestimated. Oil spills are projected in the environmental impact reports to occur 4 times a year. And that the environmental impact reports identify a Class 1 significant unavoidable impact to rare species from oil spills. And that includes the tiger salamander and the California red-legged frog. And the trucking is another problem. The trucking is a huge threat to the different types of amphibians that are pond breeders. They migrate at night from and to ponds to breed, and during the nighttime operations, the trucks can certainly do hit a lot of the animals, and we lose a lot of tiger salamanders and red-legged frogs that way.
And I would just add very quickly, you know, yes, the field has been around for 100+ years, but really we're at a point right now where we just can't take chances with our drinking water resources. And these projects will be drilling hundreds of new wells directly through a groundwater basin relied upon by surrounding communities for their drinking water. So, you know, that's just a risk we shouldn't be taking.
Great. Final question here. How much of a factor was the current low cost of oil in last week's victory with PetroRock announcing its withdrawal of their application to drill in Cat Canyon?
So the withdrawal of PetroRock's proposal is a significant victory for EDC, our clients, our partner groups, and really for our community, and especially those communities that live and work and play around the Cat Canyon area. So, you know, together we did manage to halt this proposal from moving forward in the county process for over a year before they even decided to ultimately withdraw their application. So they took this wait and see approach, and while they waited, you know, we continued to put pressure on and advocated for denial of these projects. And there probably are other factors that play into why PetroRock withdrew their application at this point in time, but we nevertheless celebrate it as a major victory and success, and are re-energized to keep going forward to protect our community and environment.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all for joining us today. And as Tara said, please make sure you're on our email list so you get updates on these projects as we move forward, and have some needs for you guys to help us speak out. And also feel free to circle back through email on any further questions. As I mentioned, this will be recorded and on our website and social media in the next couple of days. Take care and stay healthy.